The same financial advice that made wealthy people richer is quietly keeping everyone else broke. And the worst part, you were taught to call it smart. Here's something almost nobody talks about. The concept of good debt, debt that pays for itself, debt that builds wealth, isn't wrong, but it was never designed for you. It was designed by people who already had assets, collateral, and legal infrastructure for people who already had assets, collateral, and legal infrastructure. When it got repackaged and sold to the middle class as a wealth-building strategy, something quietly broke. You can see it in the data. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows that the top 1% hold the majority of their debt in investment in business loans, while the bottom 60% hold theirs in mortgages, student loans, and auto debt. Same word, completely different game. So what's actually happening here? Why does the same tool produce opposite outcomes depending on who's holding it? By the end of this, you're going to see debt differently, not as something to fear or embrace, but as a system with rules that were written before you sat down at the table. Let's start with something that should bother you. The phrase good debt entered mainstream financial culture during the 1990s and early 2000s, during the self-help money boom. Before that, debt was largely considered shameful, something you avoided. Then, almost overnight, borrowing became virtuous, if you did it right. Here's the contrarian view almost no financial educator will say out loud. The good debt narrative scaled at exactly the same time banks needed new customers for complex lending products. That's not a conspiracy, that's timing and incentives. Now think about what good debt actually requires to work. It requires that the asset you bought with borrowed money appreciates faster than the interest compounds. It requires that your income remains stable long enough to service the debt without defaulting. It requires that you have enough financial buffer that one emergency doesn't unravel the whole structure. Those three requirements? The wealthy have built-in infrastructure for all three: diversified assets, stable passive income, liquid reserves. Most people borrowing good debt have none of those buffers, which means they're not playing the same game. They're playing a version of the game with worse odds, no safety net, and full exposure to downside risk. And they were told it was the same thing. That's the lie. Not that good debt doesn't work, it does. The lie is that it works the same way for everyone. Here's the foundational piece most people miss. Leverage doesn't create advantage, it multiplies existing advantage. If you borrow $500,000 to buy a rental property and you have a $2 million net worth, a real estate attorney, a property manager, and a tax accountant structuring your depreciation, that debt is a powerful tool. If you borrow $500,000 to buy a rental property and you have $8,000 in savings, a W-2 income that barely qualifies you for the mortgage, and no understanding of cap rates or carry costs, that debt is a loaded gun. Same loan, same interest rate, entirely different risk profile. The wealthy don't just use debt differently, they use it from a different position. And position is everything. A chess grandmaster and a beginner can make the same move. It means something completely different depending on the board state. Copying the financial behavior of wealthy people without copying their structural position is dangerous. And yet that's exactly what mainstream financial advice asks you to do. Here's something simple that has enormous implications. Wealthy people use debt short-term to acquire assets that generate long-term cash flow. Most people use debt long-term to consume things that lose value immediately. That's not just behavioral, it's mathematical. A 30-year mortgage at 7% means you pay roughly double the purchase price of the home by the time you're done. And your home, in most scenarios, is not an investment, it's a residence. It doesn't generate income, it generates maintenance costs. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The wealthiest real estate investors rarely hold mortgages for 30 years. They use short-term bridge loans, commercial financing, or refinance and redeploy equity while the cash-flowing property services the debt. They use debt as a revolving mechanism, not a 30-year anchor. When you take a 30-year mortgage, you're not doing what wealthy investors do. You're doing a consumer version of it, packaged to look the same. Time horizon matters more than the debt itself. The same principle borrowed over different timelines with different underlying assets produces completely different outcomes, and almost nobody teaches you how to think about that. Now let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. When a wealthy investor's leverage deal goes sideways, they have legal structures and assets insulated from each other. One bad deal doesn't contaminate the whole portfolio. They lose money, they don't lose everything. When a regular person's leveraged purchase goes sideways, a job loss, a medical emergency, a market correction, the debt accelerates. Late fees, penalties, credit score damage, in some cases foreclosure. The downside is not symmetric. The wealthy investor's worst case is taking a loss on one deal and restructuring. The average person's worst case is bankruptcy, years of rebuilding, and long-term psychological damage around money. Same tool, categorically different consequences. Financial risk isn't just the probability of something going wrong, it's what happens to you when it does. Wealthy people engineer their downside to be survivable. Most people using good debt have not. So before you take on leverage, don't just ask, will this asset appreciate? Ask, if this entire position collapses tomorrow, what does my life look like? If you can't answer that clearly, you're not investing. You're gambling with borrowed money and calling it strategy. Here's the practical framework almost no one gives you. Every piece of debt wealthy people take on has a defined exit, not a vague hope, a defined exit. Run it through this filter. Does this debt produce income or appreciating equity directly? Is there a clear exit within a defined timeline? Can I absorb the full loss of this position without catastrophic damage? Does this leverage multiply something I already have or fill a gap I don't? If any answer is no, the debt doesn't qualify as good. It qualifies as risk with optimistic framing. Student loan for a credential that leads directly to a higher income role in a high-demand field potentially passes. Student loan for a degree with no defined career path in an oversaturated market fails. Mortgage on a cash-flowing rental property with strong reserves potentially passes. Mortgage on a primary residence at maximum borrowing capacity with no reserves fails. This isn't about being anti-debt, it's about being precise. Wealthy people are precise about debt because they understand it's a contract, and contracts have consequences when you can't perform. Now, let's talk about something almost invisible. Carrying debt has a cognitive cost. Financial anxiety degrades decision-making, reduces impulse control, and increases short-term thinking. When mental bandwidth is consumed by financial stress, fewer resources are available for strategic planning, patience, risk tolerance, and long-term thinking. These are the exact capacities you need to build wealth. Wealthy people manage debt without cognitive burden because infrastructure handles it. Advisors, systems, diversified income. The debt isn't living rent-free in their head at 2 in the morning. For most people, it is, and a person making decisions under chronic financial stress makes fundamentally different choices than someone operating from security. That's the invisible cost, the one that doesn't show up on a balance sheet but shapes every financial decision you make. So here's the reframe. The goal isn't to avoid debt, the goal is to not use debt as a substitute for position. Wealthy people use debt to extend their position. They already have income, assets, legal structure, and downside protection. Debt lets them move faster. Using debt to create a position you don't yet have, to shortcut into a financial tier you haven't built infrastructure for, is where the trap lives. Not because you're not smart enough, but because the tool requires a foundation that most financial advice assumes you have and never helps you build. The gap isn't information, it's infrastructure. So stop asking, is this good debt or bad debt? Start asking, what does my financial infrastructure actually support right now, and how do I build the rest? The rich use debt as an accelerator. Most people use it as a bridge to somewhere they hope to arrive at someday. Accelerators need an engine behind them. Bridges need solid ground on both ends. If you're borrowing against a future that isn't structurally certain, you're not building wealth. You're betting on a version of your life that hasn't materialized yet, using money you don't have for assets that may or may not perform. And you were told that was the smart play. It can be when the infrastructure is there. Build the infrastructure first, then debt becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a lifeline, not a shortcut, not a leap of faith, a tool. Precise, controlled, purposeful. That's the difference. And now you can see it.